Morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Robyn Budish. I'm the Executive Director of Transit Choices. We are a coalition that is advocating for an equitable, safe, and reliable multimodal public transit system for Baltimore and beyond. We have two exciting presentations for you this morning. We're going to begin with Maryland State Delegate Robbyn Lewis, who is from District 46. We're delighted to have her with us to speak about her 2024 transit initiatives and legislation. Before I hand it over to Robbyn, I'd like to just let everyone know that at the conclusion of Robbyn's presentation, we will open the floor to questions and comments. So if you could please just keep those to yourself until that part of the session, we'd be most appreciative. Robbyn, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Robbyn. A lot of good Robbyn energy in the house this morning. Thank you so much, Robbyn and Jimmy, for inviting me and welcoming me. And good morning to everyone. Thanks for your interest and attention. I'm Delegate Robbyn Lewis. I do represent District 46. That includes all of the communities around Baltimore Harbor, from Greektown and Bayview on the east, all the way around the harbor, south to Brooklyn, Curtis Bay at Cherry Hill. It's an honor to serve. I am on the Health and Government Operations Committee in the Maryland House of Delegates, so I do a lot of health policy in keeping with my background in public health. But I'm also a very passionate advocate for transit. And for those of you who think about these things a lot, and I know that's everyone in this audience, there's a connection between transit, transportation writ large, and public health, because transportation is what we call a social determinant of health. And I try to keep that in mind always when I'm working hard to improve the mass transit, public transit options in our city, region, and state. So I'll dive right in by sharing my screen. While I'm doing that, I'll also mention, for those of you who aren't aware, I am the only car-free legislator in the Maryland General Assembly. And what that means is I do not own a car, and I depend on transit, whether it's bus, sometimes, but not often, subway, walking, riding, and sometimes if I have to, ride share to get around. Now, I hope you can see my screen. What I want to do is a slideshow. Okay, from the beginning. And as this is coming up, should not be animated. Okay, for some reason it's animated. We'll get through this. What you'll see here in this first slide is a photograph that I took. This is an image of a woman and her child attempting to cross Fayette Street. They're standing on Library Square, which is at Linwood and Fayette, on the borderline between Southeast Baltimore and East Baltimore, where I live. This is just a few blocks from my house. I chose this image because it really connects for me health and transportation. Every day, this little kid has to get home from school and he has to cross a 4-lane highway to do so. It's dangerous, it's mentally taxing, it's not beautiful. And so I remember images like this when I do my legislative and advocacy work. So a little bit about me. I mentioned I represent the 46th. I'm on Health and Government Ops, or HGO as we refer to it, but I do a lot of transportation and transit work. I also serve as the chair of the Joint Subcommittee on Program Open Space. And what that means is that I have oversight over decisions that are made about expanding and preserving public lands, which is something that we all care about. Land use should further our health and environmental and social justice goals, so I love that. My background, again, in public health, really focused internationally. I have lived in 4 countries in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. I worked in 14 countries to expand and improve public health. Peace Corps volunteer, all that good stuff. And it all helps to inform my work. I love buses. I love all things transit, but I'm a big fan of buses. And the reason I emphasize that, it's so important to remember that while we love modern, fancy, high-tech transportation options, the bus is the workhorse of every transit network. And if our bus system isn't as robust and isn't running as frequently and reliably as it possibly can, it doesn't matter what else we do. So to improve the quality of bus service, the workhorse of our transit system, I have dedicated years of my life to make the most out of the dedicated bus lane network that we have. In 2022, I passed House Bill 53, which is a local bill allowing Baltimore City to enforce bus lanes using camera monitoring. The bill did not specify what kind of camera monitoring. It only made clear that Baltimore City could use its existing camera system, which includes exterior, stationary cameras for monitoring the bus lanes and enforcing them. I like to think of enforcement as protecting dedicated bus lanes. Remember that in Baltimore City, about 80% of bus users are African American, people going to work and school. Got to make this system work for them. So I'd be happy to take questions about the dedicated bus lane legislation that we passed. It just took effect in May of 22, and we are expecting a report this month, December of 23, to see how things are going. Lots more I could tell you about that. If you have questions, please raise them at the end. We'll come back to it as we're trying to move quickly. That's me waiting for the bus at Charles and Baltimore Street. To further the interests of improving transit, this essential public good, I realize that legislation isn't the only way to make things better. In fact, a lot of times what we need isn't a bill, we need action at the community level. About 4 years ago, before COVID, I started hearing a lot of complaints from my constituents who live on or near Fayette and Orleans Streets, right in the border between Southeast Baltimore and East Baltimore. That fraught and historic borderline, formerly a literal racist red line that divided white ethnic Southeast Baltimore from predominantly African American East Baltimore. And that borderline is still fraught. Fayette and Orleans function as barriers, cutting off the flow of people, opportunity, energy, and not only that, incredibly dangerous highways running through these densely populated, very historic row house communities. Where I live, constituents were complaining about high-speed traffic. They raised the alarm about fast-moving cars that are literally plowing into, driving into people's homes. This happens very frequently. And everyone was asking for solutions. What was interesting is that these historically divided communities, white, ethnic, traditionally, legacy, African-American, working class, didn't necessarily talk to each other, but they're all complaining about the same thing: high-speed traffic, streets that are not safe to move around in. There are 3 elementary public schools on this corridor, little kids trying to get to school, subject to all this danger and traffic violence. So I decided that the best thing to do, rather than take each complaint individually, was to bring things together, to convene people with a shared interest in safer, more livable streets. This convening turned into a coalition that now includes more than 300 members, 7 neighborhoods bordering Fayette and Orleans over here. And the coalition's mission is to make our streets healthy, accessible for all, safe to move around, to recalibrate the priority that puts cars on top and humans on the bottom, to put us on equal footing, safe footing, really center human safety, human health, and complete streets is a mechanism. So we advocate for complete streets, we advocate for traffic calming, and we are now, after a couple of years, slowed down by COVID, working on a traffic calming project at the William Paca Elementary School, which is nestled right in between Fayette and Orleans over here. And we're developing grant applications. We're going to raise some money. We are, our fiscal agent is the Southeast CDC. We're just a convening, right? We're not a nonprofit or anything yet, but folks are energized, and we hope, a model that Graham Carell Allen uses with his work on placemaking with art. Graham Projects, I'm sure you guys all know Graham. We hope to do some sort of street painting, traffic calming there to keep the kids and school staff safer. We're having a meeting on Saturday, December 16th. That's this coming Saturday. You're free to join us. The link is there, but we're happy to share it, or find us on Facebook. What I believe is that people of Baltimore really want livable streets. We asked people, about 250 people told us, if you could change one thing on my block, get these fast moving cars out of here, get these cars off my street. I think people really want that, and I believe we can achieve that. So we're doing it at a small scale with the Coalition on Livable Streets. So that's what I do, in addition to writing legislation. I'll talk a little bit about the legislation I've passed on complete streets funding. And that was a really, I think, clever bill that provided enabling power to the city of Baltimore to direct all of the camera enforcement revenues, all the tickets that get written and fines that get imposed for camera enforcement, to funnel all of that money into the city's Complete Streets program. We got it done. Took a few years. We got that done. The challenge, however, the rubber meets the road with implementation of that legislation. The city finance department has the power to really implement that, to take those revenues and plow them into complete streets. They demanded more flexibility. Public safety for them means not only safe mobility, but also law enforcement. So there's a fine line there. And as a state legislator, I passed state legislation, cities implementing. So if I were you guys interested in this subject, I'd pay attention to we're expecting the first report from the city on this this month. So the photo is of me and about 20 people. We organized a protest bike ride to stop former Mayor Jack Young from shutting down the Monument Street bike lane. You might see my colleague, Delegate Regina Boyce, in that crowd as well. So this is what we do. It's not all about writing bills. So the transit legislation coming up, I feel like I'm maybe pushing on the limits of time here, but this coming session, which begins in January of 2024, I'm reintroducing legislation to create statewide camera enforcement for dedicated bus lanes. So right now we have a local Baltimore City bill, taking it statewide. Introduced it last year, came up against some opposition. We've worked really hard to fix that, and I believe we have a strong piece of legislation. It's supported by the Maryland Transit Administration, the MTA. There's federal money available. If we pass enabling state legislation, we can compete for those federal Infrastructure Act monies, and I really hope we can get this over the line. Welcome your support and testimony and all that. Next bill, I call it the Pedestrian Fatality Prevention Act, but you can think of it as the big SUV bill. This proposes to increase the fees or tax that is incurred when folks purchase a personal vehicle that is for their personal use, not for working on a farm or doing construction, but for personal use. And that vehicle is more than, I believe the bill says, about 4,000 or 5,000 pounds. And also, if the vehicle is more than 40 inches high at the grill. Think of a Ford F-150. That's a humongous vehicle. Doesn't really make sense to have it on our narrow little city streets. And it's also more dangerous. There's abundant evidence. A recent report by the National Insurance Group, I'll share the link if you need it, found that vehicles this size and height are multiple times more likely to cause a fatality in a crash, a pedestrian crash. Unacceptable. We can fix that with Maryland at a record number of traffic crash fatalities this last year. Next legislation, I'm introducing a proposal to create an e-bike rebate. So it makes it easier to purchase an electric bike for people of middle and low income. I believe that one of the things the Federal Infrastructure Act overlooked was incentivization to get out of cars entirely and get people on other modes, including bikes. Electric bikes should have been included in the Federal Infrastructure Act. They weren't. So let's do it at the state level. Other places are doing it. Colorado, I think Chicago, all over the world, making it easier for working people to get an e-bike. And I want to do that. Finally, what I call my one less car bill. It shouldn't be taxed. It should be one less car bill. This, as a reintroduction, will make it easier for folks to decide to get rid of one car. If a household owns a car, they can get rid of it and get a tax credit. So you've got to have carrots and sticks, and that's what I'm all about, making it easier for people and also creating more options. I need your support. These bills need your support. Written or in-person testimony, always welcome. You can email my office for information. Last but not least, for those of you who were around when the former governor canceled the Red Line, you know that he's at fault for canceling the Red Line, but I believe that our people and our leaders also played a role and made it easy for former Governor Hogan to cancel that project because there was no pushback. There was no well-organized, mobilized voice in support of that project. We need to fix that. Our current governor, Governor Westmore, has stated his commitment to investing in transit for our city and region. County Executive Johnny Ochevsky also committed to investing in transit for our city and region. We, the people, have to be ready to stand up and shout and scream and support them so that when they go to the federal government, to the Federal Transit Administration, the FTA, and ask for $3, $4, $5, $6, $7 billion, the people have their back. We cannot sit passively and wait for everyone else to do the work. People got to be organized. So we really need you. The Baltimore City House Delegation, that's all the members of the House who represent the city, are organizing convening an event to consolidate our support for transportation. And that means transit and all modes for our future. Saturday, January 27th from 11 to 2, in person at Morgan State, virtual option as well. We are going to get together and envision our transportation future, and I want you guys to be there. So you can, again, contact my office. Robbyn will make sure you have my info, but I hope that you will be there and lend your voice and your imagination to creating a positive, mobilized, force so that we get what we need and deserve in our city and region. I'll end there. Yeah, email me, get involved. Okay, thank you very much. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Robbyn. Very, very informative and relevant presentation. And as always, we appreciate your time that you share with us. If you don't mind taking down your presentation, that would be great. There are a couple of ways as we move to the Q&A session of our meeting. You may raise your hand and I will recognize you, or you may also message or put a message in the chat, and I will do my very, very best to get to as many people as possible. I would like to kick off the Q&A period by talking with you and getting your thoughts regarding really the two major announcements that came out recently. One regarding the enormous, cuts, right, to the transportation budget, and the second has to do with the unfortunate light rail situation or shutdown indefinitely due to some significant problems with the system. Could you speak to that, please?
Yes, and talk about timely. We scheduled this presentation weeks ago, and here we are in all of us reeling from the news, the double whammy of proposed budget cuts and service cuts. So it just so happens that yesterday, the Maryland General Assembly's Transit Caucus, and that's all of the members of the House and Senate who believe that we must fight for transit. There are about 70 of us out of the 188 member General Assembly. The Transit Caucus held a briefing with MDOT Secretary Wiedefeld and MTA Administrator Holly Arnold. And they were very forthcoming in responding to us, the delegates and senators, and answering our questions about the proposed budget cuts and the service cuts. What we heard was a state agency in complete acknowledgement that the situation is not what any of us want. When they talked about the proposed budget cuts, and again, I emphasize proposed budget cuts, and I'll tell you why in a second, but when they talked about that, they made it very clear that they understand the implications in terms of inequities. The impacts will be felt disproportionately by communities that are already underserved with transit. They understand the potential impacts to our planned requests for federal funding. They know how it makes us look to the feds, and it doesn't make us look good. And they also understand that nobody wants to have to do this. So $3 billion cuts are wanted by anyone, least of all our governor, who came in with the promise to invest. I would say this to all of you. We have in a democracy, the executive, and that is, in this case, the governor, proposes, but it's the legislature that disposes. The governor's proposal is a bill. Like any other bill, it will be introduced and discussed. The legislature will review, deliberate, debate, fight. I'm sure there will be tears, but at the end of the day, the governor proposes, the legislature disposes. That budget proposal will take its place along with all the other bills we'll be considering during session. And I want to reassure you that all of the members of the Transit Caucus, and we sit on all the committees, including the budget committees that make funding decisions, we are absolutely committed to figuring out how to pay for what we need, how to pay for the capital projects that are on the table. I also remind everybody, there is still planning money for projects like the Red Line. We committed millions and millions of dollars for the planning. It's the construction funds that we've got to figure out. So we will finish the planning for the Red Line and other projects that have planning funds, and our work during this session and possibly next session 25 as well will be to figure out how to pay for it. I'm committed to it. My colleagues are committed to it. I know the governor wants us to figure it out. It's our job. So know that we'll do that. With regard to the service cuts, I was reassured to hear the MDOT secretary and MTA administrator pledge their commitment to keep prioritizing public safety. We can't have people riding on train cars that are going to explode. We've got to keep people safe. And although it was so demoralizing and depressing to hear that announcement, I'd rather people be safe. We don't want to lose lives of the operators and mechanics and the people who depend on the service. So I appreciated hearing that. I also heard them commit to ensuring that the shuttle bus, the bus bridge short-term response will be functioning. They committed to having transit ambassadors at every station during high volume times, like morning and afternoon commutes. There will be MTA transit ambassadors there to help people navigate how to get where they're going. They committed to that until this service interruption is completed. And I think we just have to continue to stay in touch with MTA to make sure that things are happening as they should, that the bus shuttles are working and people are not losing employment or getting kicked out of classes because they're late to their destinations. So that's what I would just respond quickly if there are any more specific questions.
Thank you, Robyn. We have time for one more question. And I'm going to go to Daniel.
Hey, Delegate Lewis.
Hi, Daniel.
Good to see you. I hope you're doing well. I just had one quick question in regards to the dedicated bus lanes and the work that you've done with those. So last week, the planners for the RAISE grant, the kind of medium-term solution for the east-west corridor, along where the red line will eventually go, the planners held a public meeting. And they kind of showed updated plans where they kind of scaled back some of the plans. Initially, it was supposed to be about 10 miles along the corridor of dedicated bus lanes, and they're trimming that back down to 5. And so I didn't know if you had seen those plans, if you had any thoughts on them, if there's kind of any sort of comment or
reaction
perspective on that.
Well, I always want more transit, not less. So I'm not happy to hear about reducing the number of dedicated bus lanes that are planned. I also know that planning department made that proposal. It's because it's grounded in a reality, a fiscal financial reality that they're facing. And it's my job as a legislator to, if that is indeed the case, if finances are driving that withdrawal, that reduction, then we need to figure that out. I also think it's really important to mention to this crowd, because you guys will understand it. Baltimore City is in a crunch. We have been in a crunch for 100 years. We've been under-resourced. Our funds have been slashed. We are responsible for so much of our infrastructure, and we have not gotten the state support. Please remember the Great Recession and the belt tightening that happened in 2009 and 10. The Highway User Revenue Fund, or HUR fund, was cut. We, in the Maryland General Assembly in 2022, passed legislation to restore those cuts. 2010 to 2022 is 12 years where the city has been denied the resources it needed to maintain its roads, to implement the dedicated bus lane program. When that came online in 2017, Baltimore City pays for that. Didn't have the money to do it right. And what we're looking at now, though I think we were able to bring the HUR funds for Baltimore City back up to par, we're looking at a clawback of those monies if we don't fix the budget. So that's what the planning department's probably responding to, now that I think of it. We just have to fix the money. And can I say one more thing, Robyn? Can I take the temperature of this group? I was talking to a colleague yesterday, my wonderful colleague, Delegate Sheila Ruth from Baltimore County, about whether or not we could raise revenue for transit through a statewide ballot initiative. Ask the people of Maryland whether they'd be open to paying a little itty bitty bit of a fee or tax, a half a cent on every purchase, like a sales tax bump, if those funds were funneled directly into our transit needs. Other states have done it. The American Council for Transportation, APTA, they do this survey every year, and they found that even in this year, in 23, that 9 out of 10 of the transit ballot initiatives nationwide, they passed. People are willing to tax themselves to pay for transit. Would you guys do it?
Listen, what I promise to do is this. I will send the meeting recording and the presentations to the Full Transit Choices Coalition. I will also share your contact information.
Great, thank you.
And as always, we support your efforts, Transit Choices, let us know what we can do moving forward. Because of our tight agenda, I know that we could sit and talk with you for the next half hour, but we do need to move on. So thank you again for being so gracious with your time and for sharing all the wonderful work that you're doing with us.
Thank you.
We will now move to our next presentation. We are delighted to have Interim Deputy Director Planning at Baltimore City Department of Transportation, Stu Sirota, with us this morning. He is going to speak with us today about what's new at Baltimore City DOT's Planning Division. Welcome, Stu.
Thanks, Robin. Hi, everybody. And I want to start by saying Delegate Lewis is a very tough act to follow, but I will do my best. I just want to say I'm so grateful for her work and all the great things that she's been doing. So I need to share my screen. Let me make sure I do this correctly. Robin, I don't think that you've made me, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. I think you need to make me a co-host.
Let's try it again.
Okay.
You're good to go.
Okay, bear with me a second. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Not yet. Yes. Great.
All right, great. So, all right, well, I will start by saying that I've been with DOT for just over half a year now, so I'm still fairly new, still getting my feet wet, but learning a lot every day. But I think those of you who know me know that I've been here for a long time. I've been in Baltimore and worked here for over 30 years, wearing different hats. But I have to say, this is a really interesting time, even with the budget cuts going on, everything. There's a lot of great things happening here, and it's an exciting time to be with the city and with the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. So let's dive right in. So I oversee Baltimore City's DOT's capital planning division, and which is broken into two groups. One is planning, and the other is actually transportation services, which I'll be talking more about in the coming minutes. Let's start by talking about planning. And the very first slide that I wanted to share has to do with safety. We all know that during COVID, there was a lot less driving, but many people also learned that even though there was a lot less driving, the incidence of traffic crashes and injuries and deaths actually went up. And that was due to increased speeds and worse crashes. Most people have seen some version of this graphic on the right that shows that if you are a pedestrian, you have a 9 out of 10 chance of basically surviving being hit by a car when it is traveling at 20 miles an hour. But those odds drop to 1 in 10 if that same car is traveling at 40 miles an hour. So there's an urgent need to change this trend that's been happening all over the country, not just here in Baltimore. Our data also shows that there's a disproportionately high incidence of crashes and injuries in low income and also communities of color. And so Towards Zero is DOT's aspirational version of really Vision Zero, which I think most people have heard about. It's a national movement that has been around for about 8 to 10 years now. And our work is really about identifying high crash locations and targeting resources to those areas. And we're very happy to say that in the last year or two, we've been able to take advantage of the U.S. Department of Transportation's new program, which is called Safe Streets for All, or SS4A for short. It's administered through FHWA. And we have won a SS4A action plan for $1 million that is now just getting off the ground. The focus of the action plan is going to be to conduct research with Morgan State, Hopkins, as well as University of Maryland, to research crash and safety data to create a high crash and injury network using GIS, so we can actually see it on the maps, and to also evaluate benefits of differing types of infrastructure treatments, also to develop a model to show the high crash areas, as well as a model of the health benefits of implementing various safety measures. That action plan will be happening over the next calendar year in 2024. And we are also extremely excited that we just won the next round of monies from the SS4A program for an almost $10 million grant to actually do pop-ups and other aspects that build on the action plan to really start implementing some of those ideas with a $10 million grant. And I will say also that Baltimore had the largest grant award in this cycle of any city around the country. So we're really happy about that. And there'll be a lot more to talk about in the days and months ahead about this program. So how do we implement towards zero? And that's through complete streets. It's also a national movement that started about 20 years ago with the goal of making streets safe and comfortable for all roadway users by essentially putting safety over speed and balancing the needs of all of the different modes of travel. It's an approach that guides DOT's investment decisions and also designs essentially by prioritizing safety and comfort of pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users at the top of the modal hierarchy, if you can see this graphic here, while still accommodating motor vehicles. Baltimore was one of the first cities in the country to adopt a Complete Streets Ordinance in 2018. And that was followed up by our Complete Streets Manual that was finalized in 2021. And within the manual, we developed 10 street typologies, as we've called them, to guide retrofits and different treatments that are appropriate for their urban context. These include things like road diets, bump outs, enhanced crosswalks, and other types of measures to reduce vehicle speeds and to encourage multimodal transportation. We also have an active bike planning program to implement bike infrastructure. Sorry. So what's shown on this screen is the bike master plan for the city, which was an aspirational plan mostly that was finalized in 2015. And it was followed up in 2017 by an addendum to the master plan to really focus on looking at building a separated bike lane network. So really looking at what of the pieces of the 2015 plan we could start building to create a complete network. And here are some examples. This is the big jump that's been around for several years. And this next year, we plan to take it to the next level. These are the barriers. There are water-filled barriers made out of plastic that were never meant to be permanent. And hopefully by the end of next year, with the resurfacing of Druid Park Drive, this will become more permanent. The Maryland Avenue cycle track, which was also built several years ago. And we have many other projects that are in various stages of planning right now. over the last 4 fiscal years, we've implemented about 7 miles of protected bike lanes, and we have 7 more miles in the active planning stages. We've also built almost 5 miles of shared use paths, and we have over 12 more planned. And we have also implemented and built over 5 miles of what we call bicycle boulevards, and we have 3 more miles planned in the coming years. The image on the lower right shows a GIS interface of our bicycle counters that we've just installed in the last several months. That was done through a Maryland Bikeways grant. We have 10 counters throughout parts of the city where we have bike lanes, so we can actually gauge and measure how well they are being used. And we have another round of grant money to implement 10 more over the next 18 months. Next thing I want to cover is the Baltimore Greenway Trails Network, which is a project to build a 35-mile loop within the city and these actual spurs. It's a partnership with the Rails to Trails Conservancy. Sections of the network have already been built, and we're actively working on what we call northern segments right here. We recently completed plans for the eastern portion of these northern segments, and we will be continuing work to get to 100% design plans over the next year for this section. And we're just starting to do planning and looking at the areas of the southern area too. Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to advance. As well as, and we also just were awarded a Maryland Bikeways grant to get us to final design on the section along Boston Street that will transition to the Norfolk Southern right-of-way that the Baltimore City Department of Planning is actively working on as our partners. So the next bucket of things that I wanted to just cover is that there is an enormous amount of planning coordination on many different projects that are funded by grants. I could do a whole talk just on this actual slide. We don't have time for that, but just wanted to mention that there are some large-scale federal grant-funded programs, most notably the West Baltimore United project that we were awarded in this year, and I'm happy to say that our grant will be executed with the Federal Highway Administration in the coming month, and the project will kick off in earnest in the first few months of the next year. We're also working very closely with our partners at the Maryland Transit Administration as they are planning the Red Line project. We are meeting with them on a bi-weekly basis. And there's several other RAISE grants that have been won to work on Penn Station, the East-West Transit Corridor, and also the Mondawmin Transit Hub. And others listed here, and I'm just going to move beyond that, as well as a slew of more locally based projects in terms of placemaking and neighborhood traffic calming. This is an example of a project that was implemented on 33rd Street, and as well as safe routes to school. We have about a dozen of these projects going on at any given time, and I was thinking that I could come back at a later time and do a sort of deeper dive on all these different projects. Now I want to just shift gears to talk about the other side of the house, which is the contracted transportation services. So everyone has seen the Charm City Circulator, which has been in service since 2010. We have a fleet of 23 buses with a maximum of 16 operating at any given time. We hired a new contractor, Transdev, that took over service at the beginning of the year, and it's made a huge difference in terms of buses being out on the street, and other aspects of the operations have gotten much better. There's been almost 250,000 miles of revenue service just in this calendar year to date, and over 1.1 million in trips. We are in the process of purchasing 7 new buses in the next 2 years. And this just shows a current map of the system. It has 4 routes, and DOT this year released a transit service development plan for the CCC. One of the most notable changes that's going to be coming down the pike in 2024 is a significant change. Instead of the banner route, which is this route down here, there is a new route called the Cherry route, which will serve Cherry Hill. It's not shown on the map here, but the plan is online, and we're looking forward to having that rolled out, as well as several other changes to the routes shown here. On the right just shows the real-time app, which usually works pretty well, and you can see the buses tracking on the screen. In terms of ridership, during COVID, as we would expect, we lost a lot of ridership, but it's been coming back. And this bar for this year is only through last month, and we expect to see us finishing out at a higher level by the end of the year, as ridership continues to come back. And the next service is the Harbor Connector, which is a free commuter-oriented service for passengers that operates Monday through Friday. It's operated by Harbor Boating. It has a fleet of 3 vessels on 3 routes. And not to be confused with the water taxi, which is operated also by Harbor Boating, but that is purely market-based and has different routes, and is based on a fee. Here's a map showing the Harbor Connector routes that operate during the weekdays. And there's been almost 200,000 rides to date this year so far. And we're also very happy that we won a federal grant for $5 million to modernize and expand the fleet and to build new terminals and docks. Again, harbor ridership has dipped, but also coming back, which is very good news. And then finally, our Dockless Vehicle Program, which is really started in 2018 with a pilot program, scooters and bikes, and went into effect in 2019. We have 2 permit holders currently, Super Pedestrian, formerly called Link, as well as Spin, and as well as accessibility vehicles. And Spin has currently operates 150 bikes right now. So we have equity plans right now to ensure that the actual distribution of the vehicles is evenly spread across the city, and it's a very well managed project where the vendors have to show, and they have to basically ensure that they have an adequate number of their vehicles in different parts of the city, including what we call equity zones. Here's a map. These areas shown in blue are the equity zones, and the distribution zones are shown in blue. And so this helps manage the project, and you can read through this and see that they really have to ensure that they are keeping in line with the service. And it's sort of a incentive-based plan where every quarter they need to show us how they've done over the last quarter, and if they fall outside of the areas that they need to keep, they can receive they can be cited. And so we are able to track all of this using a dashboard. So you can see at any given time in real time where there are scooters, and we can analyze this in many different ways. The other thing that we're doing is we are implementing more parking corrals to encourage the orderly use of the vehicles. You can see the orange dots are the current scooter corrals that we have out there on the street, and we're adding more every month. And one of the really great and interesting features that we have is something that's called geofencing, where we can ensure that that riders don't end the rides in areas that they shouldn't be. And so, like it's shown here, this is a geofence around the harbor. And we've also implemented these in areas where there have been some conflicts. And the other interesting aspect of this is that it's also set so that when scooters enter a zone here in Fells Point, they automatically reduce the actual speed. The usual maximum speed is, I think, 12 miles an hour, and this takes it down to 8, so it makes it safer. So finally, I just also want to show that that the Dockless vehicle ridership, again, during COVID dipped, and it came back up in 2021. I think there were a lot of people that really just wanted to get out, and there was a lot of pent up demand. In more recent years, it's sort of leveled off, but it is still on the upward trend. So that is good news. And I think that was my last slide. I just want to mention there's a lot more information about the projects that we're working on at www.streetsofbaltimore.com. It doesn't have every single project, but we are adding more every month. So I would be happy to take questions at this point. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Stu. And we certainly would welcome the opportunity to have you come back. We know that there's so much more that you would love to share with us, and we certainly would welcome you to do so. Before I open the floor to questions, Stu has a hard stop. He has to go to another meeting at 9:30. So I'm going to try and move through as many questions as we can. I'll also make sure that he receives the chat messages and he can respond accordingly. So I would ask everyone to kindly, when you're called on, to please keep your message or questions rather, and or feedback as brief as possible. I wanted to start with, let me just see here. Jimmy, did you have a question for Stu? Hold on, Jimmy, you need to unmute.
You hear me?
I will. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Stu, I wondered if what the impact of the state budget cuts and reduction in service, if any, is going to have on CityDOT.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that's on everyone's mind right now. And I wish I could offer more, but this is just so early days right now, and we're taking a hard look at it. There'll be much more information forthcoming in the sort of days and weeks ahead. But right now, we're just trying to get our hands around it and trying to figure out how the possible impacts can certainly be minimized. But right now, we're just taking a hard look at all of the numbers and all the projects, and we'll definitely have more to say. But right now, I don't think there's much more than I can really comment on that, Jimmy. I wish I could.
We have a question from John in the chat, and he wanted to know if you could report on the precise plans for and status of the 33rd Street and Gwynns Fall Parkway portions of the network.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the work that we were doing on that section of the Baltimore Greenway Trail network was funded through a Maryland Bikeways grant to get to 30% design. We did finish the sections from Druid Hill Park East, but we are continuing to work and to analyze options for the western portion of that. I came on board at DOT mid-year while that work was being wrapped up. And we intentionally sort of took a pause to kind of regroup so I could learn about all the issues. And as the grant-funded project wrapped up, we plan to restart the project in the next month or two ahead, and going back out to the public. We're looking at some other options right now, but as of right now, we're still getting ready for that process. So again, there'll be much more forthcoming in the next month or so.
Thank you. We have a question from Sue. She says the Charm City Circulator still does not announce stops for deaf or blind riders on all of the coaches. If the automated system is not working, the operators, are still not announcing them. She rides most days, Monday through Friday, and appreciates the service. Could you speak to that, please?
I wasn't aware of that personally, but Sue can contact me offline, and I will be happy to follow up with that with our transit services administrator.
We have another question in the chat. Will the circulator ever get a mobile app or become available on the transit app, which many people already use? Maybe the new buses that are being acquired will have GPS? Question.
I think I showed that. We do have an app, and I think in the transit app it does show the CCC. Yeah.
We have the next question, which says, also the east side status of Norfolk Southern, and also whether the long complete BGE agreement has been executed by the city.
For the Greenway Network Trail?
Yes.
The Department of Planning is still working closely with them on that. It isn't finalized as far as I understand, but they are getting closer to it.
Great. We have, I think there is one more. Here we go. There are design plans to have an underground light rail along Pratt Street, which is in the floodplain. Instead, should the city and state consider putting the surface light rail along Howard Street?
I don't believe Howard Street is a current alignment possibility right now. I'd have to refer that question back to the MTA, but I will say that MTA and DOT are working, like I said before, very closely. We're in touch almost on a daily basis, honestly, and there is still much more work ahead to flesh out all those issues. But there was just a round of open houses recently that talked about the current current alignments, and so I'm looking forward to how that process over the next several months keeps on working through the process. That's all I can say about that, honestly.
Well, thank you. The last question has to, I feel traffic enforcement is a missing link in creating and maintaining safe streets, recognizing that enforcement often has a disproportionate impact on under-resourced and minority communities.
So that's a question about better traffic enforcement.
Crashes and fatalities also disproportionately impact these communities. She feels it's critical that Baltimore City work with the Baltimore Police Department, Sheriff's Office on a traffic enforcement plan.
I would agree. I'm not on the operations side. I'm not on the sort of traffic side of the house, but as I'm still learning how different parts of DOT work, I've got a very close relationship with our folks in traffic. And I'd like to maybe follow up and find out more about what efforts are either have been done recently or what there are plans to do going forward. So appreciate that very much.
Well, we will let that be the last word. Again, Stu, we're very appreciative to have you share your time with us today, and we will certainly invite you back and perhaps have more time on the agenda to really do a deeper dive into a lot of these issues. So to our two guest presenters, thank you so much for being with us today. Very interesting, informative, and relevant presentations. To each of you, this is our last meeting of the year. It's kind of hard to believe. We've accomplished a great deal. We're proud of the work that we're doing. And as always, we remind you that we could not do it without your ongoing interest and support. So from all of us, we wish you a merry, happy holiday. Be safe, relax, rejuvenate, regroup, and we will be back in January 2024 with our agenda for the year of all things transportation. So have a wonderful day. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.